I didn't expect that night to matter. That's the first thing you need to understand. Nothing about it felt important at the time. No warning signs, no strange intuition. Just exhaustion, routine, and the quiet relief of finally being alone with my thoughts. I had been mentally drained for weeks, the kind of fatigue that doesn't show on your body, but slowly dulls your awareness. When you're tired like that, you stop questioning things. You stop noticing details. You trust familiarity more than instinct, and that trust can be dangerous. The house felt safe, familiar, predictable. I locked the door out of habit, not fear, turned off the lights, let the silence settle naturally around me. It was late enough that the outside world had gone still, but not late enough to feel eerie, just quiet, comfortable quiet. I remember thinking how rare that silence felt. I sat down and did nothing. No phone, no background noise, just stillness. In hindsight, that moment stands out more than anything else because the silence wasn't empty, it was waiting. The first thing that changed wasn't a sound, it was my attention. Something about the quiet felt uneven, like a rhythm missing a beat. I paused, listening without realizing I was listening. The house itself hadn't changed, but my awareness had sharpened, as if my body sensed something my mind hadn't yet identified. I dismissed it immediately. Old houses settle, air moves. The brain fills gaps when it's tired. I told myself all of that calmly and confidently, because fear hadn't entered the room yet. Doubt is manageable. Fear is not. A few minutes passed, maybe longer. Time was already starting to blur. That's when the atmosphere shifted. The air didn't move, but it felt thicker. The silence stopped feeling neutral and started feeling intentional. I became aware of my breathing, how loud it sounded in my own ears, how careful each breath felt without me consciously trying to be careful. My shoulders tensed. I remember thinking very clearly that I no longer felt alone. Not because I saw anything, not because I heard anything obvious, but because the space behind me felt occupied. It's the same sensation you get when someone stands too close without touching you. A certainty that doesn't need confirmation. Your body recognizes it instantly, even if your mind refuses to. I stayed still, hoping the feeling would fade. It didn't. Instead, I noticed something else. A sound so quiet, I almost missed it. At first, I couldn't place it. It blended into the background, indistinct but persistent. I focused harder, straining to identify it, and that was when the realization settled in slowly, like ice water poured down my spine. It was breathing, not mine. The sound was close enough that it couldn't have come from another room. Too steady to be environmental, too controlled to be accidental. Whatever it was, it existed in the same space I did, behind me. My body locked up completely. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to face it, to confirm what my senses were telling me. But another instinct, deeper, quieter, told me not to move at all. Don't acknowledge it. The thought didn't feel like my own. It felt like a warning. The breathing continued, unbothered, almost patient. It didn't rush, it didn't hesitate. It sounded calm in a way that felt deeply wrong, as if fear existed only on my side of the situation. I shifted slightly in my seat. The moment I did, the breathing changed, not louder, closer. The air beside me felt alert, charged, as if my movement had been noticed. My heart thudded once, hard, then slowed to a controlled, deliberate pace that felt disconnected from panic. My body was preparing for something, even if my mind didn't know what. I stared straight ahead, refusing to look back, pretending with everything I had that nothing was there. The breathing stopped. The silence that followed was unbearable. I felt something lean closer, not touching, not pressing, just invading the space beside me. My skin prickled, every nerve felt exposed. I understood then how fragile the idea of safety really is, how easily it collapses when something violates your expectations of reality. I stood up slowly, expecting resistance. There was none. I moved toward the light switch, every step deliberate, terrified that turning around would make the situation irreversible. When I finally turned on the light, the room flooded with normality. Nothing was there. No movement, no shape, no explanation. But the feeling didn't leave with the darkness. That night, sleep never came easily, and in the days that followed, something about the house felt subtly wrong. Not haunted, not dramatic, just altered, as if a line had been crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Then I noticed it, a small detail, easy to miss, impossible to explain, and that was when I realized the experience hadn't ended that night. I didn't notice it immediately. That detail waited until my guard was down, until my mind had almost convinced itself that exhaustion and imagination were enough to explain everything. That's how it worked. Quietly, patiently. It was something small, so ordinary that, under normal circumstances, it wouldn't even register as worth remembering. But once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it, and more importantly, I couldn't explain it away. The chair I had been sitting in was no longer where I had left it. At first, I thought nothing of it. People misremember positions all the time. Memory is unreliable, especially under stress. I tried to tell myself that I had moved it when I stood up, that the angle felt different only because I was actively looking for meaning now. But that explanation didn't survive scrutiny. The chair wasn't just shifted slightly. It had been turned. Not randomly, not crooked, but deliberately angled toward the space behind where I had been sitting, toward the exact spot where the presence had felt closest. I stood there longer than I want to admit, staring at it, replaying the night frame by frame in my mind. I knew how I had stood up. I knew the path I had taken to the light switch. I knew I hadn't touched the chair. And yet there it was. That was the moment doubt stopped being comforting. In the days that followed, my behavior changed in ways I didn't consciously choose. I avoided sitting in that room. When I did enter it, I stayed near the doorway, never fully turning my back on the interior. Silence began to bother me more than noise ever had. I started leaving lights on, not out of fear exactly, but out of resistance. As if illumination itself was a form of defiance. Sleep became fragmented, not because of nightmares, but because of anticipation. I would wake up in the middle of the night with the distinct impression that something had shifted, that the room was slightly different from how I had left it. Nothing ever was, not visibly, but the feeling persisted, stubborn and calm. That calmness was what unnerved me most. Fear fades when nothing happens. Panic exhausts itself. But this wasn't panic. It was adaptation. My mind had quietly adjusted to the possibility that I was not as alone as I believed. And once that idea settles in, it doesn't leave easily. I began to question my perceptions more carefully. I paid attention to reflections, to shadows, to the way sound carried through empty spaces. I caught myself listening for breathing that wasn't my own, even when logic told me there was nothing to hear. Weeks passed. Nothing dramatic happened. And yet, I never returned to the version of myself I had been before that night. Because the most unsettling realization came later, long after the fear had dulled into something quieter and more philosophical. I began to understand that the experience wasn't about being threatened. It wasn't about an intruder or an entity or something with intent I could label as malicious. It was about awareness. Whatever had been there didn't need to scare me away. It didn't need to announce itself. It simply existed within my perception long enough to alter it, to introduce doubt where certainty once lived, to remind me that my understanding of reality was incomplete, and that understanding never fully recovered. Sometimes, late at night, when the world goes still in that same familiar way, I catch myself pausing, listening, Not because I expect something to happen, but because a part of me now knows how fragile the idea of alone truly is. I don't feel watched anymore. That's not the disturbing part. The disturbing part is that I've learned how easily something can be present without needing to be seen, heard, or understood, and how quickly the human mind learns to live with that possibility. Some things don't need to return to leave a permanent mark. They only need to be close enough once. And that's why, even now, when the silence settles just a little too perfectly, I don't try to break it anymore. I just listen.